Good evening and welcome to AACOM's Council on Residency Placement webinar on the NRMP Supplemental Offer and Acceptance Program, or SOAP. My name is Katie Harden and I am one of the members of CORP, and I am pleased to have several other members of CORP with us this evening, and I'm going to allow them all to introduce themselves shortly. But I also want to take a moment to thank our resident speakers, Dr. Rob Steele and Dr. Caitlin Thomas, for joining us this evening. So before we get started, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping things. So this webinar is being recorded. The webinar recording will be posted on the AACOM website shortly. All webinar participants, you guys are in listen only mode. If you experience any kind of technical issues during the webinar though, please use that chat feature and we'll do what we can to assist you. If you do have questions during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A feature. And our panelists will try to do their best to answer those questions throughout. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of this evening. With that, I'm going to ask each of our individuals on our panel to briefly introduce themselves, and then we will begin the presentation. How about we start with our two residents? Dr. Rob Steele, would you mind going first?
Hi, my name is Robert Steele. I'm a PGY1 resident at Freeman Health Systems down here in Joplin, Missouri, which is right next to KCU Joplin here.
All right, and Dr. Caitlin Thomas.
Hi, I am Caitlin Thomas. I'm a PGY1 in emergency medicine at Guthrie Robert Packer Hospital, which is right outside the New York, Pennsylvania border.
And then our other guest panelist is Angie Clemmer.
Hi, I'm Angie Clemmer. I'm a residency placement coordinator at KCU on the Kansas City campus. And I've been helping you guys for the last several years. Thanks.
And then Dr. Ken Hiles.
I am Dr. Ken Hiles. I'm the campus dean at KCU Joplin, and I'm also the chair of the Council on Residency Placement.
Dr. Holly Waters.
Hi, I'm Dr. Holly Waters. I am faculty in the Osteopathic Principles and Practice Department at Nova Southeastern University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Clearwater, Florida. And I'm a member of the Council on Residency Placement, and I also help advise students on residency matching and SOAP.
All right, and Dr. Jazz Patel.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jazz Patel. I am Director of Career Development at the Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine in Dothan, Alabama, and I'm also a member of CORP.
All right, and again, my name is Katie Harden, and I am a Residency Placement Coordinator with Kansas City University on the Joplin campus. So let's go ahead and get started real quick. We want to go over some of the SOAP timeline information that's really important for you to know for next week. So you will learn, this is real quick snapshot. We're going to go into a little bit more detail in a minute about the SOAP rounds and everything. So you will learn on Monday morning, 9 a.m. Central Time, if you matched by email and the R3 system. And then on Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time, you will find out if or where you matched. So Monday is if you matched, Friday is where you matched. And then the SOAP rounds will occur all day on Thursday. So let's go through a little bit of that timeline more in detail. So again, Monday morning, 9 a.m. Central Time, you find out if you matched. The list of unfilled programs is also released at that same time. Applicants will have all of Monday to prepare applications ahead of programs, gaining access to applications at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So you have all day Monday to work on applications, and to be clear, whether you submit your applications to programs at 12 p.m. or midnight Monday night does not matter. Just like the main match where you had most of September to prepare your applications and they were all time-stamped on that September 28th, it's the same kind of concept here as well. So anytime you submit your application before Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time, they're all going to be time-stamped Tuesday morning, 7 Central. And so Tuesday and Wednesday, programs are going to be reviewing applications, contacting applicants to offer interviews. They'll be working on their preference lists as well. And just as a reminder, in SOAP, applicants do not create preference lists or rank order lists. You will receive offers from programs during the SOAP rounds. So the SOAP rounds begin Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Central Time, that's when round 1 starts. There are a total of 4 rounds, as you can see on the chart. During the 2 hours of a round, At the very beginning of the round, offers from programs will go to the applicants for their review and a decision. If a program only has 2 positions open, only 2 applicants are given an offer. They are not offered to multiple people. So it is very specific as to how many positions they have available. Only that number of applicants can receive an offer. You have until the end of that round, if you receive an offer, to accept or reject that offer, or ignore and let it expire. No applications can be submitted during the 2 hours of a round. And at the end of the round, the list of unfilled programs will update at the end of every single round. And applicants can resume, if you want to, submitting applications. At the end of round 4, that list is made available to applicants still in search of a program, which is that unfilled programs list. So a couple really important things for you to know. Your schools are going to provide support for you throughout the week. Contact your school to find out what their rotation attendance expectations are if you are participating in SOAP. Hopefully they're already communicating that to you though. If you are partially matched or a part of a couple and you matched, but maybe your partner didn't, you will be able to see the location of where you matched, or the partner, if they matched and you did not, they will see what the location, and it'll be like city, state, and zip. That's it. They don't tell you the program. It'll be the geographic location to assist you with SOAP planning. If you're partially matched, like maybe you got your advanced position, but not your prelim position, it'll tell you the city, state, and zip of where your advanced position is. Again, it's intended to help you kind of navigate and coordinate where you want to focus your efforts for where you apply for SOAP. So there are no application fees to participate in SOAP. It's free since you already registered and applied to at least 1 program for the match. If you did not apply to programs, there will be a fee. I believe it's $99 if I remember correctly. And you've already released your board transcripts to programs, so you do not have to pay for that again. That's already been done. If by chance you did not release a board transcript and are going to during SOAP, you will have to pay that fee. But for the majority of you, you've already done that. There is no fee. You will be allowed to apply up to 45 programs in any specialty with positions that have an opening, in a program that has an opening. So if you applied to maybe general surgery during the main match, you are not, and there's maybe only 1 or 2 positions open in Gen Surg, you can go ahead and apply to other specialties that have positions open. You are not obligated to apply to the same specialty that you did during the main match. You can completely change strategies and apply to a different specialty. And you'll actually find a lot of specialties don't even have positions available during SOAP. If you are an international student, they still have to be willing to sponsor visas. That's really important for you to know. So you still have to pay attention to that detail if you are an international student. So some additional information. So applicants may choose to participate or pursue other interests other than clinical training and refrain from participating in SOAP. But you cannot accept a position with any program that participates in the NRMP match or SOAP until after SOAP ends outside of SOAP. You can accept research fellowship positions if you'd like. Those are not part of this NRMP match process. Any applicant who is SOAP eligible may only use ARIS to apply for positions, and they can only receive and accept offers through SOAP until the end of the SOAP process. One of the other things, I'll go over some of the rules. So important to know, offers only come around once. If you choose to reject or ignore an offer, they're not going to offer that to you in another round if you're hoping that a better offer comes. Once it comes, it's done if you ignore it or reject it. Partially matched applicants are limited to only seeing unfilled positions in the category they're lacking. So if you matched into an advanced program, you will only be able to see the unfilled positions in prelim programs. If you match into your prelim, you will only be able to see the programs that have unfilled positions that are advanced category. So you won't be able to see categorical programs, for instance. Offers accepted by an applicant during SOAP, they are binding, just as match results are binding. So once you accept that offer during a round, that is considered complete. You are contractually obligated. Yes, the program will send you the official contract later, but because you took that acceptance, that is a legally binding match and acceptance. And the last thing that's in red, that's really important. Applicants and the representatives, that's your mentors, your deans, your advisors, your peers, they cannot communicate with a program until the program has initiated contact with you. That's really important. A program can actually report you and it will be investigated if you are in violation of that rule. And that's different than SOAP than the main match. All right, so Dr. Waters, would you mind going over some of the data that we've got here?
Absolutely. So let's see, Austin, if you could put the links that I've provided here in the chat for everyone so they have access to them. So these are some data tables that I've obtained that NRMP openly publishes after each match round every year. One is from the results and data of the residency match, which is a big, like multi-hundred page document that goes through a lot of the different details. And then there's also from advanced data tables. And so basically what we're looking at here is how many DOs enter the match, how many PGY, how many M4 DOs, so fourth year medical students from DO medical schools, and how many graduates of DO medical schools who are entering the match, and what are their results. Now, I'm not going to go through all these numbers individually here, but what we can do is if we go to the next slide, I took the data and I put it on some graphs so you can see. So just looking at the last couple of years from 2021 and 2022, you can see that there were over 6,000 DO seniors who matched in the main SOAP. That's before, or in the main match before SOAP specifically. And it was somewhere in the realm of 600 to 700. You can, if you check out the data tables yourself, you can see exactly how many were unmatched in the main match. So then it was slightly higher than that who became eligible for the SOAP process. Now, they can be eligible for the SOAP process without having been unmatched because maybe they didn't submit a rank list, or maybe they weren't participating in the match, but they were eligible for SOAP, coming back from a leave of absence or whatnot. And then it also shows how many of those DO seniors successfully SOAPed. And then we're also looking at the same graph where the first graph is about the DO seniors, so the fourth year medical students from osteopathic medical schools. And then we're also looking at students who have already graduated from their osteopathic medical school and are either participating in the match or participating in the SOAP for the past 2 years. And this data can be kind of hard to see when you compare it against the number of students that matched. So let's go on to the next slide where we look at specifically the students who participated in SOAP. So in 2022, there were a little over 600 fourth year osteopathic medical students who participated in the SOAP process, or who were unmatched at the end of the main match round, or the primary match round. And then about 891, I think I recall, that were eligible for participating in SOAP. And of those 891, just over 500 were able to obtain spots in the SOAP. So that's a higher than 50% success rate. And that's something that's really great for all those students who were unable to obtain positions in the main residency match. And one thing that you want to pay attention to is that if you don't obtain a position in the match or in the SOAP process during your 4th year, and you go on and graduate and obtain some other, maybe like a research position or some kind of outside work, or maybe a preliminary year position, and then you want to participate in the match again, you want to be aware of what the data shows for osteopathic graduates in the SOAP process. So the match rate, again, if you look at the previous tables, wasn't as high as 4th year medical students. The number of unmatched versus SOAP successful student graduates was significantly lower. So in 2022, a little over 300 DO graduates were unmatched, almost 400 were eligible for SOAP, but less than 100 successfully obtained a match in SOAP. So be aware of this data when you're making decisions that are going to impact your life and your career.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Steele. So what we're going to do now is have our 3 panelists that are guests tonight kind of share their perspective, and we'll let Dr. Steele go first. Maybe share a little bit about your experience going through SOAP last year, and any advice you would give to someone that's a potential SOAPer this year.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Steele. Like Katie had introduced, I SOAPed last year. I graduated from KCU Joplin. You know, soaping, I knew I was going to SOAP. I applied orthopedic surgery, and, you know, I applied really narrow. I kind of knew what I was doing, applying narrow, but, you know, I knew the risks associated with it. I was also a little fatalistic in my application and refused to apply for anything else, which for me, in the end, it worked out, but I don't recommend that strategy. We're already at the end here. So what happens if you do SOAP? You need to take a moment and just accept it. You sit down and have a nice, warm, fuzzy conversation with yourself. You're going to have to realize a few things. That perhaps the career that you had sought out to go to medical school for isn't going to be the career that you're going to do. Doesn't mean that you don't abandon the love for medicine or abandon the love for that specialty, but you got to find something. You know, there's opportunities in business, but it's not the same as an attending physician, regardless of what you're doing. You went to school for this long. I know the feeling of wanting to be done, wanting to quit. I remember the first thing I said, forget it. I said, screw it. I'm 35 years old. This was a second career for me. Why go on? Why not go back to business where I could go have a decent income, have a good life, pay off my debt? And that question ate at me for a little bit. You don't have a lot of time to sit between soaping and Monday. So it's a quick midlife crisis you somewhat go through, and everybody will go through that. So my perspective on this is you got to be ready to SOAP. Obviously, you guys are here. You already have some inkling that may be an indication. You need to prepare yourself as best as possible going into that day. When you open that match letter, whether you SOAPed or not, doesn't matter. You just need to see what that says. And then you need to kind of root yourself into preparing for the next week, because you're going to work harder in that next week than you've worked probably in all through medical school. And I don't say that flippantly. I literally woke up 6 o'clock on Monday, and I was lucky I had friends with me who did SOAP. 2 very good friends. That's the other piece of advice I'd give you, is have friends. And though for those of you that feel alone, you need to reach out to your school, because there's going to definitely be empathetic ears and hugs and tears and all that stuff. You need somebody to cry it out with. That's just the reality. But you have to pick yourself up, and you got to keep moving forward. So Monday, you start looking at what programs are open. I threw all my tokens out, and I was like, oh, emergency medicine, that's probably the best alternate for me. I'm kind of a big, goofy guy. Boom, emergency medicine. I'm like, what's next? Family medicine. Boom. I'm like, that'd be perfect. Small, I want to be in a rural area. You got to start gamifying what your future looks like. It's another thing. It's like, okay, maybe I'm not doing orthopedic surgery. Maybe I'm not doing general surgery. Maybe I'm not doing urology or whatever specialty, super specialty you want to do. But you can still make and have a great career out of that. So you got to have friends, you got to prepare yourself, and you got to use your tokens right away. And then I kid you not, I fielded, the reason you need friends is I fielded 70 phone calls, because once you submit those applications, then it's going. and you're going to be busy, and you need somebody to be a secretary, and you need somebody to write notes. And I had a whiteboard in my room, and I just had one of my friends sitting like, what program was that? Okay, what time do they want to do it? And you got to have that kind of support. I don't know any other way to do it. If I was alone, it would have, I don't know what I would have done. So that's my, at least my little advice. It's going to be one of the hardest things. Hopefully this is the hardest thing that you'll have gone through in your life. And you'll be better for it at the end. It seems maybe cold and callous to say that, but going through these hard adverse events will make you better in the end, I promise. So just keep with it, please. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. And Dr. Thomas, would you mind sharing a little bit about your SOAP journey and perspective, and then any advice you have for applicants this season?
Well, it'll be a tough act to follow, Dr. Steele. That was a really good description and good advice for SOAP, and very candid. I'll try to do the same. So for me, I was applying to general surgery. I liked the idea of doing procedures. I liked being in the operating room. I liked some of the acuity of patients that I had seen on some of my rotations. And I personally had an inkling that I was probably going to end up SOAPing, but a lot of my advisors and a lot of people that I trusted were like, no, like there's no way. You have, a great resume. There's no way that you're going to SOAP. And so I was very torn between trying to believe like these people that, are faculty and that are in charge of me saying, oh, it's not going to happen to you. But it can happen to anyone, is what I learned on Monday. Fortunately, I had a little bit of that inkling, but I had to drive from my rotation site to my home. And so I would definitely encourage you, and if you have a little bit of a drive when you find out that news, because your school might have you go to your rotation, to definitely like take a couple of minutes before you get in the car and get behind the wheel, and make sure that you like process it as much as you can, but you still like have to get somewhere where you can do all of the things and get on a computer and be able to kind of make your headquarters and your home base for everything. And then kind of like Dr. Steele said, then it's kind of like the really reckoning with yourself and figuring out what is really important to you, and what was it about that specialty that you liked that you might be able to translate into another field and another specialty. And some of that's hard because there is like kind of the worst 2 hours of SOAP, which is you find out the news and then you're waiting for everything to open up again, so that areas will tell you like what programs are available and what specialties are available. So like honestly for me, like emergency medicine was not even on my radar because it was so competitive and there was never SOAP spots available. And then emergency medicine's kind of going through its own reckoning as a specialty where there are SOAP spots available, and it's less competitive than it has been in the past, which is a different webinar. But anyway, so I tried to think about things that I had liked about general surgery and whether or not I really, wanted to try to keep going down that path, because I didn't really think that anything in my application was going to change that had brought me to that Monday in the first place. And I wasn't really willing to do like a research year. I didn't want to have to, risk going through the match again if I could help it. So for me, I felt like, I think trying to find something else was a good idea. And when I really thought about it, it also was helpful to kind of be honest with myself and say, I think what you actually like doing is you do like some procedures to some degree, but maybe not necessarily standing in the operating room. And you actually like acute patients. You like taking care of critically ill people. And was important in kind of seeing, oh, then emergency medicine is open. I think that's actually probably what you want to do. And internal medicine, I applied to some as well, because I figured, oh, well, you can do like a critical care kind of like fellowship later on. You can do something like that, but being really very honest with yourself about what it actually is that you can see yourself doing that may not be what you had always hoped and dreamed, kind of like Dr. Steele said, but that is palatable to you, and that can lead to as much happiness and less burnout as possible. I did not have friends helping me with the actual SOAP process, in the sense of like no one was on the phone with me. My friends were busy. They were going to their rotations. We don't have the SOAP week off at my school or anything like that, or match week. me, it was soap week, so it was match week. So I did have a couple of friends that were on less busy rotations, and so they read over my personal statement because I had not done any preparation for soap, even though I had this inkling. I kind of thought about it in my head and had some ideas, kind of knowing, but had never like put anything to paper, had never done any drafts. And sometimes I work really well under pressure. Another sign of emergency medicine that was a good fit for me. So I spent most of the morning kind of figuring out my new personal statement, what I was going to write about. I think it was actually much better than my original personal statement for applications. But if you do not work under pressure as well or optimally, I do recommend that you try to do that ahead of time for different things that you might be thinking would be good fits for you if they're open during the SOAP. Certainly. So if you're here and you're thinking that you have an inkling, be very honest with yourself and try to be vulnerable with yourself to think, what are my assets and what are things that I'm good at? Am I okay working under pressure? Is it going to stress me out more and like make my mental health suffer if I try to do soap things before match week next week? Just kind of think about what is important to you and what is going to help you the most. Because some people would also think, oh my gosh, I cannot write a personal statement in like half a day, because on that first day when the soap opens, you have to look at all the programs, you have to try to do like some mini research into them to see if they're programs that you think you might be interested in, if they're a specialty that you might be interested in, and then put together the pieces of your application. I did see a question here about a SLO for emergency medicine. You don't need that. They know that if they're in the SOAP, that might not have been your original plan, and that's not a big deal to anyone, but still thinking about letters. And if you think that like, was the letter part of the reason that you might be in the SOAP scenario, or is it other things that are on your application? So just trying to think about all of those things. Not that you need anything else to stress about, but I just submitted my letters that I had from my original application, and I didn't think that that was what had led me to my SOAP scenario. What else? And then take time at the end of the day. So I would say kind of like after business hours or after like 6-7 p.m. Eastern time, your local time, if that's where the program is. I felt pretty confident that I was probably going to stop getting phone calls. And for the most part, I was right. I think Wednesday night, I had one phone call at like 7 p.m. from a program director that I'd already talked to. But I made sure that like my friends, like we went out for like your favorite thing, whatever that be. For me, we went to a trivia night at a local bar, and I like needed that time to like let off some steam. Someone else drove. I was like, this has been like the most stressful couple of days of my life. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to try to find moments and try to find time during that week in which you can take care of yourself, and to also anticipate that like, even if you get a spot in the SOAP, like there is probably a part of you that it'll be hard to celebrate with your friends a little bit, because you're thrilled to have a position and that stress is over with. But like you thought that your actual match day on Friday with the friends would be very different than what it ended up being, even if you have secured a position. And just kind of trying taking the week like day by day. A lot of my friends were like, didn't know what to say and felt very uncomfortable because like they I don't know exactly, what it was, but they just kind of tried not to like take that personally. Like it's nothing, it's kind of more of a system like process failure, not something that you personally did to fail to end up in this situation. So that's my 2 cents on my experience.
I had Dr. Thomas hit on a lot of good points on that. A lot of more things than I did for sure about the week. But I forgot, I was going to say something, add on to you about that. Finding time for yourself at the end of the day, that's important because you're going to go crazy during the week. And it's also important in residency. So that's important. You have to find the mental reprieve during this amount of stress, because I promise you, SOAP week isn't going to be as stressful as your first time intern night on the floor in the hospital and during your first code. So it's not gonna. So take this with the challenge, take the reins and own it like that. That's what I did. That's what I have to do. I have to own my own personal embarrassments, faults, whatever, whether it's my fault or wasn't my fault. I posted on Facebook. I said, well, your boy's soaping. No one else really posted that, but I got a lot of feedback from people going, I really appreciate you posting that. I've never seen anybody really post about that, but that's important. Like this is your career. it's okay to own it. You're in you got into medical school. Remember, you were chomping at the bit to get in over all those thousands of people. I remember telling myself, I'll do whatever it takes over all those thousands of people to become a doctor. And now at the last minute, don't shoot yourself in the proverbial foot. Okay. So
I love that. And I love that you guys both emphasized the importance of reaching out to your peers and your friends to support you through the process. I think being open with your peers and your friends is going to help you more than you know, because a lot of students are kind of, last year, my experience was some of my students were a little bit embarrassed by it. And so they didn't want to tell anybody. Well, then you're doing it alone. And it's amazing how much your friends are going to rally behind you to do everything they can to help you through this process. Use them because they love the opportunity to help you and navigate. So I'm glad you guys talked about that. So Angie, would you mind sharing your perspective as an advisor who went through this last year with the current the timeline that they've got developed now, and some advice for our SOAPers that are students that will are potentially preparing for SOAP?
Yes, if you are on this webinar, and I tag into Dr. Steele and Dr. Thomas, start preparing now. As he mentioned, it's really difficult to do that personal statement on the fly on the second. So if you can prepare in advance, do that. Get the everything you can do to help prepare for that week is one less stress for the week of. And if you don't need it, great, that's okay. You don't have to worry about it. And keep in mind that, even if, like Dr. Thomas mentioned, everybody's convinced you won't SOAP, but there's always a chance. We always have one or two for our students that are oops, what happened? It was a surprise. They had lots of interviews, they had lots of this or that, and it just didn't happen. So think about it ahead. This way it helps lessen the shock factor for you. And you might be able to have already started thinking of ways to make yourself an even better candidate when you're in SOAP. And part of that, as both the docs mentioned, is really thinking through that specialty. Really think about, I love what Dr. Thomas said, thinking about what it was and what you liked about that specialty. Maybe there is a better fit for you or something that you can do and get to it eventually. I love for students who end up, if you can go to a specialty that has subspecialties in fellowship so you can specialize later, or find that you really is, you like more on demand and in the fly than you do your previous one. Really think about those and be open to it. A lot of the advanced specialties that you may be applying to now will not be available in SOAP. So it could be your reality. So think about it in advance so that you can kind of start thinking about what you would apply to. And part of that, like we mentioned, is preparing your personal statement. I saw a question in the Q&A about that. Reviewing it now and thinking about what, like they mentioned, what specialty did you want to possibly apply to? Or do you want to write one that's a bit more generic? Maybe some of the, change it up to include some of the experiences you had in fourth year, because those wouldn't have been in your personal statement originally, that might fit better towards residency if you don't have a specific specialty. Though I highly encourage you to try to, so you don't have to write, if you're applying to multiple specialties, having 4 new personal statements is really difficult. So you may consider doing a more generic one, but it is encouraged that, if you know in advance, start writing it towards that. You can tweak it out and make it more towards that specialty. Talk with your friends, get their opinions, have them read it. Or if you have advisors like Katie and I, send it to us. We're happy to help you read it and tweak it for you. That's what we're there for that whole time. So use your resources. Don't be afraid to ask for help or to have someone review it. Review your LORs. Obviously you can't read them, but you might think about if they're all slows, maybe I should see if I've worked with a physician or have a good relationship with this physician in another specialty. Like, if you're going to apply to internal medicine, maybe reach out to your 3rd-year med doc or some of the physicians you have that you might have developed, you have a close relationship with. They might be able to willing to write you another letter that's more for residency than specialty if you haven't decided on that. Dr. Howes, you have your hand up. I was going to go ahead and let you talk.
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Thomas said that, her school did not give them off match week, and most schools do not give match week off per se, but a lot of them will give those that have to soap, they will give time off. And if the school does not give time off, don't be afraid to ask your preceptor, explain the situation. And most of them will be very willing to give you extra time so that you can actually have time to devise a plan and implement it, and not have to worry about rotations while you're on there. So even if the school does not officially give soap week off, most of them will give those who have to soap time off to do that.
Yes, I
don't be afraid to ask.
Yes, this is definitely the time period which don't be afraid to ask for help for any and all pieces of the soap week so that you can get it be as successful as possible. So we were discussing LORs, and if you can get one for the new specialty that you've decided in advance you want to apply to, you can. That's why we have you look at those earlier than the day of if you can, just because sometimes it's hard to get one on a 24-hour period. So you can still use your old letters, but could be beneficial to have a new one and maybe include some of your fourth year experiences and things like that. And then review your application. You can't really update it, but you can look at it and maybe think, okay, well, this doesn't go over this or this that happened in my fourth year. So then you might consider pulling that into the personal statement. Once you've submitted it in ARIS, it doesn't allow you to update it, but you have to reuse it. But you could use your personal statement to maybe bring in some of those pieces that might help you that that weren't in your application previously, and things like that. And that's doing all of those things in advance will help lessen the stress from the day of, and will help you prepare better and be a little bit, it's still going to be a shock, like they both docs said, that you're going to need to absorb it and go forward, but know that you have help. Ask for help, and if you can do any prep work in advance, I'd rather you have it and not need it than need it and not have even started. And our students seem to have done well with that last year, and we're hoping they will this year again.
So one of the questions that I saw in the chat, and I think somebody did answer a little bit, I want to touch on a little bit more, is can I apply to the specialty that I applied to in the main match? One of the things I really encourage you all to do is the NRMP main match results and data report. On page 46 of that document is their SOAP data. So last year, anesthesiology, interventional radiology, orthopedic surgery, PM&R had no positions in SOAP at all. Dermatology, OB-GYN, ONMMM, PEDS, RadOnc, diagnostic radiology, and categorical surgery all only had one to three programs with positions open for SOAP. So that's something really important to know as you're looking and trying to decide what specialty you would apply to. And so be aware of what specialties are likely to have positions available and the volume of positions, because that is going to be a factor for you as you're looking at what you want to do during the SOAP process. So at this point, we're going to go to some of the Q&A. We've got a few questions that had been submitted in advance that we wanted to make sure to touch on. So alternative options. Angie, would you mind answering this? What are a student's options if they don't end up matching during SOAP either?
If you've gone through SOAP and you didn't get anything there, don't lose hope. There are still options available to you. There will still be a list of unfilled programs that will happen in the spring. Last year, there weren't a whole lot that came out at the end of SOAP, but there were some. And then also in the spring is when a lot of the specialty RCs meet and accredit new programs. And some of them will still offer and want to start July 1st of this coming year. So they will start offering those, and so you guys can apply. They may go through ARIS, they may not, but it is options you guys can do. And again, there'll be different specialties, family medicine, IM. We've had some emergency medicine, things like that come open, and keeping an eye on that is always, you always want to keep up with that. The unfilled list is still continues to be available to the students after SOAP, so you can keep checking that. And I know at our school, we keep sending out, when we hear about new accredited programs, we send it out to our students just to make sure they're aware of it. Another option, because if you can't find that clinical spot, is to look into some research that's appropriate to what you're wanting to do. If you're interested in orthopedics and you didn't SOAP and you didn't choose another position, look into getting an orthopedic research fellowship. Look into other types of research and fellowships that are available so that you can put that on your CV next year. It'll help boost your application to show what you were doing and getting there. You also, some students choose to go get a different degree, like a 1-year MPH program or something during that year. So that, again, it improves your CV for the next round through. And you may be able to, while you're there, get exposed to other programs. So it's always a good idea to have something that you can, that will add to your resume versus not having anything at all. Also, if you happen to, when you're looking for those research programs, you might consider what else they have there. A lot of times they have, ortho research, but they probably have an ortho residency. So get to know those faculty while you're there. Those are sometimes a consideration for what you're looking into and how it may tie into a residency for next year and make your life a little easier while you're working. We get a question about physician assistants, and I don't know if did we put that
physicians.
Yes, sorry, assistant physicians. It is an option in certain states, but it's not available everywhere. And it's difficult to get into just because of the liability issues and having physicians to talk about that want to sponsor you. So we don't promote it for you, but that is an option. Dr. Hiles, I know can talk about more about physician assistant.
Yeah, I was going to say the assistant physician, I mean, it does exist in several states, but as you said, the big thing with an assistant physician is you have to have a sponsor, and there's not a lot of physicians that are willing to sponsor at this point in time. So that I would not weigh heavy on using that as a means to advance your career. There are 3 states right now that they're trying to enact a bill that if you are an assistant physician and you act that way in 5 years, that you can become certified. Those laws have not been passed yet, and the other states that have it are not even entertaining those. So while it is an option that's out there, as Angie said, it's a difficult option because of finding a sponsor, and it is not one that I would recommend. Just putting that out there. I mean, it's definitely the way the whole thing started was kind of sketchy at first, in the beginning, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot.
Yeah, and it just comes up, students will hear about it, or other options through to what I call the Reddit rumor mill. And so that's why I just wanted to touch on that. Dr. Patel?
I just wanted to also mention a rumor that you might read if you Google what happens if I don't match options for me. You might see schools or people saying that you should ask your school if you can delay graduation. And so remember, that is a school requirement, and that's not always an option at a lot of schools. So although you may see that, it's not an option at a lot of schools. So make sure you check with your school about that.
It is not an option at our school.
If you ask us at KCU, we've already told you not to do that.
A lot of schools, their policy is you cannot delay graduation.
Yeah, actually, the majority of the schools they will not delay graduation. Once you've met all the requirements, if you have a requirement hanging out there that hasn't been met yet for graduation, then you have the option to take the leave of absence. But by the time we get to the middle of March, I would say that the overwhelming majority of your requirements have already been met.
Yep, that was the last thing I was going to touch on for alternative options out there. So then the next question is on 45 applications.
All right, so I have 45 applications. When do I submit them? Do I use them all before round 1? Before us as advisors dive into that, I'd love to hear Dr. Thomas and Dr. Steele, the strategy they took last year, real quick. So Dr. Steele, you had said you used all 45 right away?
I just applied right away. I said, forget if I'm doing it, I'm just sending everything. So I applied EM, FM, and then pathology. So
okay. So Dr. Thomas, what about you?
I used all 45. I think my school recommended it. And I was also concerned that if I kept getting interviews and like phone calls all week, like how was I going to like submit more applications and like find the time and the bandwidth to do that? So I think I applied to EM. I did like a handful of FM programs, 1 or 2 IM programs, and because I really thought it would be EM. And then I maybe like 1 or 2 prelim surgery, but I felt pretty good like pivoting. So I know I didn't apply to a lot of them. My exact makeup might be off, but I think that's what I did. I know I used all 45 though.
So as advisors, the one thing, realistically, logistically, 100% you can submit applications up to a maximum of 45 at any point during the SOAP week up until SOAP ends Thursday night. However, it is to your advantage to get those applications out early before programs, like we talked about, before programs can access applications Tuesday morning. So anytime before 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. If you choose to delay, keep in mind, these programs are already very actively, just like you, they're very busy reviewing applications, contacting applicants, scheduling interviews, and you don't want them to already have decided who they're going to interview and you submit it so late, you don't get an interview. And honestly, SOAP rounds on Thursday happen so fast. It's like a whirlwind day for both the applicants and for us as advisors. It's a very long day. And honestly, programs are so busy through that process, don't have time to review new applications when the gap between each round is legitimately only 1 hour. And during that 1 hour, they have to recertify their preference list. They have to resubmit that preference list for who they want their offers to go to before that next round opens. I will say, every once in a while, students do get interview offers in between rounds. We actually did have a couple of students last year got phone call interviews in between rounds. Very fast, like 10-minute call interview, and it was done. And so that is a potential, but most of your interviews are going to happen Tuesday and Wednesday. Be aware some specialties, and you're talking all 4 time zones. And so some of those interviews are going to be very early in the morning, some even very late at night. I will say a lot of our surgical prelim applicants tended to get a lot of late evening, like we're talking 8, 9 p.m. Central Time interviews, because that's when the program and the surgeons were doing their interviews. So just something to be keeping in mind. So as you're thinking about how do I use my 45 applications, what specialties do I apply, when do I submit them, keep in mind the timeline and what's going on on the program side as well, to help you navigate deciding when to submit those applications. Advisors, do any of you have other input on that topic?
We advise them all to do the 45. We've had a few students who chose to have 1, maybe 2 set aside in case they get to the end and there's something they didn't apply to. But again, we tell them, or if they've been contacted randomly by people saying, oh, why don't you apply here because we didn't know, or something. It's pretty rare. So we really don't advise you do that. But if it makes you feel better, 1, okay, but just use them all. That's my opinion on that.
There's no point in not using all 45, honestly. Okay, so the next question, if I were to accept a prelim position during SOAP, what are my chances of matching going into the match next year? So if I secure a transitional year position during SOAP, what are the odds of matching a second time around? Dr. Waters, do you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the data that we shared before, that was aggregate data of every, when you're looking at the graduates, of everybody who has already graduated from an osteopathic medical school and is entering the match after graduation. Now, it could be people who were ineligible for the match at the time and graduated because then they met all their graduation requirements but didn't participate in the match or the SOAP before. It could be people who withdrew from the match for whatever reason and decided to try again the next year. It could be people who did a research position, some kind of non-residency related postgraduate work. And it also includes people who entered into preliminary years without advanced training positions. So people who did a transitional year or a prelim year hoping to apply to the match again. Now, the NRMP did not delineate what category those graduates were in when they were reapplying to the SOAP the next year. So unfortunately, we don't know exactly how likely you are to get to a position in the match the subsequent time when you're reapplying, if you do a transitional year or some other prelim program. But what we do know is that you put yourself in a risky position, because what the data does show is that graduates of osteopathic medical schools who are entering the match after they graduate have much lower chances of matching than the overall PGY4 positions, or than the overall M4 candidate pool. And when you look at it from the program director point of view, it makes sense, because what are they used to? They're used to getting their residency pool from applicants who have completed 4 years of medical school in 4 years, and they have often have thousands of candidates to pull from. It's possible. Some of the programs obviously will be looking outside the box and they'll be looking at the graduate pool, but some of them are just going to take the entire pool of the graduate applications and ignore it. It's going to be very kind of program director dependent. So we don't want to encourage people to put their eggs into that basket and hoping that they're going to have a better outcome the next time, unless for some reason you might think that you have a new perspective, a better work ethic, some reason why you're going to be more successful after a transitional year. Anecdotally, when I was a medical student in my 3rd year, I was rotating at a hospital that had a transitional year program for a lot of people who often took that spot after not matching in the main match the year before. And I saw a huge range of success in students or in residents who were applying to the match again the next year. Some who worked really hard, who worked closely with the preceptors, who showed themselves strong residency candidates who, for whatever reason, just hadn't been successful the year before. Some of them got really good matches. And then those who, weren't able to overcome kind of the same challenges that they'd had before, they struggled to match again in the subsequent year. So it's going to be very dependent on your particular circumstances and what you're trying to apply for, but just know that it is a big risk. Anytime that you have the option between obtaining a residency spot and putting yourself in a risky position, we want to advise you to go for the bird in hand. So Dr. Hiles, it looks like you have some input.
Yeah, no, Dr. Waters, thank you. I was just going to expound on what you said. If you're in that, if you're in that position and you want to take that, and most of the time it's a prelim medicine or surgery position that you're looking at, and my recommendation is if you want to roll those dice and gamble, go to a program, accept the prelim position in a program that you would want to go to and really and truly excel. You just have to knock everybody else's socks off so that they will look at you to take you, after your prelim year. But, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're truly gambling on that. And I don't know that that's the best gamble to take.
Yeah, I think the NRMP main match results and data report, actually, I think the data is 53.6% of graduates that go into the match successfully. That's 53.6%. And like Dr. Waters broke down, unfortunately, NRMP, when they report that data, they're not splitting it up between the types of and categories of those graduates. They are already physicians, they already finished medical school, and they have entered the match for whatever reason. So just be aware of that as somebody who's thinking about, I'll just do a prelim year and go back in the match next year. 53.6% successfully match. And Angie.
And I was just going to add, when I talk to the students and when I've looked at our students who've chosen to do this in the past a couple of years, when they go back through the match the following year, they almost 99.9% of the time end up dually applying to another specialty that just is a backup because they can't go a second year without going fully matched. And I like to pose the question as if you're willing to do it then, why not do it now and get it while you're a senior? That way you don't have that extra, boulder in your way of maybe because you're not a senior any longer. If you're going to have to duly apply next year, just take it now. It's something you really should think long and hard on. So that's what I tell.
So one of the questions posed in the Q&A that we want to touch on is on board scores. So if I don't meet the board score requirements for an unfilled program, should I still apply? Angie, what's your advice as an advisor in that circumstance? If a student is SOAPing and they didn't meet, say, COMLEX score requirements for an unfilled program, should they go ahead and still apply to it?
And I've found, as I've been in residency on that side, and our standards kind of went out the window. They have them as general guidelines, but they will interview students who didn't meet their COMLEX guidelines or don't meet their STEP guidelines that they would have used in the normal match. Now, that's what I was in an IM program, so we were a bit more flexible. So some of those advanced ones might not, if there are any advanced ones available, but general IM and family and primary care they're now looking to, what else about you is going to fill their spot. So if you really want to go there, yeah, take one slot. Don't fill your 45 with places that you don't think you can get into at all, but that's where research it. But yeah, they're not a hard, it's kind of like EM. You don't need to have slow in SOAP. So there's definitely different guidelines in SOAP.
Do you think they should still look at DO friendly programs?
I do. For our students, you should look there. I mean, generally, if they're SOAPing, again, that's a guideline that we would hope they'd be a bit more flexible on. But yeah, if they're unfilled, and they need to, again, though, I wouldn't fill your 45 with programs that all, have never taken a DO. So just be cognizant of it, but it doesn't have to be as big a focus just because they're also SOAPing, in my opinion. Others?
All right, any others? So we have just a couple minutes left. Oh, Dr. Hiles.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to touch on. I said, as we're coming down to the end of the hour, I would recommend everyone, if you come up with questions after this, feel free to reach out to your residency advisor, your career placement, or whatever it is called at your school. And there is a listserv that, because pretty much all of them belong to CORP, and there is a listserv for CORP that we all share advice, answer questions, etc. So if you have a question that comes up afterwards, go to the individuals at your school for the answers. And if they're not sure, encourage them to use the listserv, because I promise you there's questions asked almost every day and answered by a multitude of people. Plus we have meetings every 2 weeks. So just, those resources are there.
And don't forget to check out the NRMP website. They've got an entire page dedicated to SOAP resources. There are some videos, some helpful tools and guides, as well as some checklists to help you, as well as advisors to just kind of help you navigate the process and make sure you're completing every step necessary. They also did do, in partner with AAMC today, a webinar that they recorded and will be on their website in the next day or so. They went through with screenshots of the different sections within ARIS and R3 to show you how the steps work as you're submitting your application, as well as how to accept, reject, ignore those offers, and what all of those screens will look like, what you need to click on. So I encourage you to check that out because of the step-by-step components that they really gave to you. And at that, we are out of time. Again, I want to thank all of our CORP members and our guest panelists for taking the time to join us this evening. We hope that you found this information extremely helpful. And as a reminder, this was recorded and should be available on the AACOM website here momentarily. Have a great evening, everyone.